Hello, everyone. Welcome to I'm Not Even Supposed to Be Here Today, a conversational, cultural savvy podcast for folks trying to make sense of a world that often goes sideways. We are here to unpack the issues that a decade ago, 5 years ago, back maybe even a year ago, we didn't think we'd have to deal with. And we're going to do that all rooted in a little history, a little culture, a little humor, a little group therapy, and a little humility. I am Chris Bevelo, your host, owner of Bearing 287, an organization fighting the good fight to make the world a better place for all, and the sponsor of this show. I'm joined by my co-host, Des Duncan, who's a social impact comm strategist by day and spends her night remixing history to explain the present. Welcome, Des.
Good morrow, Christopher. Glad to be back together, talking and shaking it up and remixing, I guess, life. I don't know.
This is going to be amazing. We're going to get to talk about things that matter to us. We're going to have some fun. We're going to swear. We're going to do all of those things. So we're very excited for folks to join us for the first inaugural show. Before we kind of get into the show and our topic for today and all that good stuff, we'll set everything up for you. I just want to say how your holiday's going.
You know, honestly, I'm kind of glad they're over. We're in that in-between time of, just, I don't know what day it is. I don't know where am I. But I don't know. The holidays are kind of weird. A couple of years ago, I just started just slowly, almost like Homer Simpson backing into the tree, just like disappearing from the holidays because it just feels so performative. Like
Performative?
You get inundated with like, oh my God, hey, we have to go do this thing before the before the end of the year. We need to see each other. I'm like, yo, we will literally exist in January. Like, why are we putting this much pressure on ourselves?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think
complex.
of what would be performative about the holidays in my world. Oh my gosh, this sweater. This is amazing. Like everybody's got that performative part, but that's just part of being a nice human being, right? When you get the weird sweater or you get the socks that are probably not the socks that you'd want to get, but you got them anyway. So I can see that a little bit. I'm also totally with you on this is the most bizarro time. I saw a TikTok, I think it was yesterday, and it was like some old school actor, and it was a scene from a movie, and there was a woman who said, like, "What'd you do today?" And he's like, "I went for a walk." And she's like, "You went for a walk? Like, where'd you go?" And he's like, "Well, I went to the dining room, and then I walked back." And that was pretty much what I did for today. And the caption was something like, "Me over the holidays when everybody does nothing and forgets what day it is," which is the truth. Yeah. Which day is it? We're recording this actually on the last day of 2025. So I know that much.
The final days. Yeah.
The final day.
The final day. I think next year, though, I'm just going to spend it at the beach. I don't know, just like no obligations, don't have to be anywhere, like because like holiday travel is a nightmare. So I don't know. I'll report back a year from now on how that went and how the family took that.
You do that. You do that. I like having everybody come together. We're having people over tonight, and it's family and friends, and it'll be festive and awesome. So I like all that stuff. Hopefully. Let's go. Okay, so a little bit about this show. I think we should tell people what the heck it is that we're doing. So Des and I have done a podcast before. For many years, we were on a podcast together, more focused on the industry in which we were in working. I've left that industry. Des is kind of adjacent to that industry, still kind of in the industry, but just from a different perspective. But we really wanted to do a new podcast. And so we got together and we tried to figure out what do we want to do. And we know that like we love historical context, we love pop culture. And so we share those things, and we also share, I'll put this mildly, frustration with the bullshit and the contradictions and the swirl and all the stuff that we seem to experience literally on a daily basis these days. Like it's kind of crazy. And that comes from all different places. So we thought, what if, even if it was just you and I getting together to talk through this stuff, there's a therapeutic element to doing that, where you're like, hey, at least at least others feel this way, and I never thought of it that way. That helps me cope. So that's what this is really about, is trying to address some of these things together through the lens that we bring, and help people cope with what's going on. If you didn't catch it already, the show's title, I Wasn't Even Supposed to Be Here Today, is a nod to one of our favorite movies, though we are of different generations. So it's interesting that we both share this movie. The movie is Clerks. Big movie for you, right, Des?
Oh yeah, big Kevin Smith fan from high school. I made it my whole personality back then, and like rewatching it again, like, oh God, like 30 years later, still holds up. Still hilarious. Still remember all the lines. Some things do not hold up. But yeah, it was just something that friends and I, we just always quoted, and it just kind of came to us of like that feeling that of Dante, just like, oh, I'm not even supposed to be here today. It just felt like such a perfect way to kind of discuss this. So
yes, that's right. And the same with my friends and I, we would quote that thing all the time. And it also is just so simple in its, there were some things that were a little bit, it jumped the shark a little bit, but I mean, that's what made it fun. If you haven't seen the movie, what we're talking about is Dante is a convenience store manager, and his best friend also works there, but he's off. Dante was supposed to be off on this particular day that the movie takes place, but he has to cover for somebody, so he's working, and a whole bunch of stuff goes down while he's working that is not good. And so he just keeps saying, in response to these situations, I wasn't even supposed to be here today. Like, I can't believe I have to deal with this. And we're like, that is our brain right now.
And I would add in a way that it does speak to both of our generations in a way, right? Yes. Where like Gen X, there's just so much, of course, that has happened to you guys. But then as an elder millennial specifically, we've always just had to deal with graduating under a terrible job market, the mortgage crisis, we're just never going to be able to buy a house, like just ladled with all this stuff. So in a way, it's like, it's also this interesting thing of like, it's a movie that you think on the surface it's like some dudes, only dudes love this movie, but like so many women in my life have like, oh my God, I love that movie. So it's like this really interesting way that people connect over a piece of culture and content that you wouldn't think. So yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
So that's it. So maybe at some point we'll have to do like a rewatchable. Shout out to Bill Simmons for his rewatchable podcast, but watch the movie and then come back and bring it into current day and see if we can pull any insights from it for today. I think it came out in the mid 90s. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Something like that. Okay, so with that in mind, each episode we are going to cover a specific issue or topic or talker or something that's going on where we feel like, I guess we have to talk about this. We have to figure this out because it's now in front of us. Let's do it together. Let's have some fun with it, and hopefully we can help people along the way. So with that, let's start with our first topic. Des, you want to set us up for that?
Yeah, I mean, as we said, we're just coming out of the holidays and all the baggage that comes with that, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, what have you. And, this year we saw just a lot of conversations bubbling up around the no contact, where younger generations are they're essentially cutting off relationships with their family or deciding to not go home for Christmas and not deal with this stuff. And of course, the idea of difficult family dynamics is not new. But what is new is hearing more of this pushback from those parents, from the older generations, who may not actually got the opportunity to do this. So maybe they're a little angry. I don't know. But Mel Robbins and Oprah Winfrey and some other folks, they both, interestingly enough, around or right before Thanksgiving, had put out content around this. Oprah did a podcast episode. It was on YouTube and like TikTok, of course, tore it apart. But it was basically the episode was called Oprah explores the rising trend of going no contact with their family. On this, she recorded in front of a live studio, had 3 different experts on family estrangement on there, and they just kind of talked about it. And I think folks from the audience stood up and kind of shared their experience. And then, of course, backlash ensues. Because especially with this message coming from Oprah, who has been so open and candid about her own estrangement from her mother and the journey there, and that she, finally forgave her, mostly because of, what she'd learned from, Christianity and the Bible or what have you. But I think what the folks that are saying, like, I'm not going to subscribe to that. I don't have to do that. So here we go. And then I know you, Chris, were really kind of big into the Mel Robbins, what she'd shared about this.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very honest about Mel Robbins because I haven't read anything other than the thing I'm going to cite here. I know of Mel Robbins, and I know of her primarily from my wife, who knows I'm going to say this, who's a therapist, which you can chime in on as well, Des. But the therapy industry has a lot of issues with Mel Robbins. Because she comes off as a psychotherapist, but she's not really that. And a lot of her stuff, most recently her controversy is over her very successful book, which is called The Let Them Theory, or it's about the Let Them Theory, which apparently she lifted from somebody else. Now she credits that person in the book,
Yep.
but just like once or something. And then, I don't know, I haven't read the book. But anyway, so I was already kind of biased toward Mel Robbins. And here's what's interesting, to go on a little rabbit hole of Mel Robbins. I had seen her on TikTok and didn't know who she was. And she came off to me as like, I just thought she was so annoying because she sounds like she knows definitively everything. You know what I mean? And maybe somebody can throw that back at me. I like to think I have some curiosity and humility, but she just would come off in these TikToks like, this is what you have to do, and that's just stupid. And I don't think she ever said that, but that's what it came off. And so I didn't like her persona before I even knew who she was. Then my wife told me about it. I'm like, oh God, that all adds up. So sorry for the long background, but I just want to be honest about my feelings toward her because she, about the same time Oprah released her show, had an essay, an op-ed with another person in the New York Times, and it was called "Life is Too Short to Fight with Family." And so basically the message of this was, look, understand that you're going to have issues with your family, but you're going to be sorry if you cut them out, if you go no contact. For example, there's no like reference to this or data, but the essay says, quote, "You may think it's better for your mental health to slowly distance yourself from someone you have difficulties with, but in the long run, it will probably have a devastating impact on your happiness and well-being." That's a strong statement. She cites that one of the chief regrets that people often cite at end of life is holding a grudge and letting relationships with their families and friends fall apart. So she says, essentially, the secret, learn how to accept people as they are, which is kind of the Let Them Theory spinoff, sometimes in spite of who they are. And then it ends with, this Thanksgiving, let your family members live how they'd like to live. They'll be grateful for it. And years from now, you may be too. So I know when we were talking about this podcast, Des, I said, like, I need space to rant. It is my secret weapon, is the rant. And so this is where my biggest rant comes in, because in both cases, the one you mentioned, and I don't know if I'm going to give you a second here. Do you have any connection to Mel Robbins that folks should be aware of?
I do. And I too have a partner who is a therapist, and she has shared her disdain essentially for Mel Robbins as well. I will say I did listen to her. I bought the Let Them Theory book at the beginning of the year because I was on a journey myself, and I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And then as soon as I shared it with my partner, she was like, oh, gross, she stole it, yada, yada, yada. But essentially my concern, and as I've learned from my partner and just listening to her, I was like, oh my God, she's making these blanket statements that without the nuance of what the actual family relationship was. And so my partner was like, I don't know, you might get someone killed by saying like, oh, just let them, or you know what I mean? Like you can't just
Yes.
apply this blanket thing without really understanding what's going on here. So yeah, that's essentially so I've come full circle back to like, okay, yeah, this person's like, I don't know, a total grifter, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, we'll have to define grifter. Grifter to me is somebody that intentionally knows that they're what they're selling is bullshit. I don't know if that's Mel Robbins. She may believe. I actually believe that she probably thinks that what she's saying is right. Like she's delusional a little bit that way. Like not delusional. Her ego is so big she believes the shit coming out of her mouth. So I don't know if that counts as a grifter, but kind of grifty. Oprah Winfrey's kind of griffy too. We'll talk about that later maybe. So let's just can I just rant for just a second? Will you allow it?
let's go.
Okay,
Do
so
it.
this is why this is, now become an issue that we have to deal with, in my opinion. So let's just take the last line from that article, which I already read, but I'll read it again. This Thanksgiving, let your family members live how they'd like to live. They'll be grateful for it. Thank you. Good for them. And years from now, you may be too. Okay, like, what do we mean by let them live how they'd like to live, right? Like, if your uncle gets a little loud in a game, fine. If grandma sometimes talks about, I mean, look, Des, I don't think we're going to hide our political affiliations here. Let's say grandma talks about Trump a lot in a favorable way. Okay, fine, maybe fine, right? But where are we drawing the line here, right? What if your family member is racist or homophobic or misogynist in a bad way? Or maybe it's not even political. Maybe they're a mean drunk. Maybe they get drunk every year and they're awful. Are you supposed to just like say, just let them, just, you know what? Let them be who they are. You know what? I'm going to give them my Thanksgiving dinner, which is supposed to be a fun, enjoyable time. And I'm going to let them offend people and be cruel. And you know why? Because they're family. I just find that so ridiculous. It's not a simple thing. I'm not suggesting that people just cut off their families, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I mean, I've had family members go off the complete deep end politically. I've had a family member that's, first generation removed from me, who's basically said all Democrats are mentally ill. Right? Am I gonna like cut that person out? Not necessarily. But if that was paired with other things, maybe. Friends who have stated they don't understand transgender and are against it as if it's like a fucking position to take. I have a cousin who, back when I was on Facebook, this is years ago, went ballistic against somebody who's very close to me, my family, who's gay, saying, oh, that's a choice. You're choosing to live in sin or whatever. I'm sorry. Why in the blue F would I give them my Thanksgiving time? Right? I'm gonna invite that cousin over for Thanksgiving dinner with my gay family member, knowing this is how they feel. No, I'm not. So this is how I draw the line, and it's not my line. It's a line that Brene Brown, at least that's where I've heard it. She said it recently in a podcast. I'm not going to have a conversation with you if your beliefs question my humanity, and I don't think it's just my humanity. I think it's anybody's humanity. So if you are going after human rights, denying LGBTQ plus rights, if you're racist, I'm sorry. I'm not going to spend Thanksgiving with you, most likely. Or as we'll talk about, we're going to have to make some kind of agreement where you don't talk about it. But it really depends how far, right? So it's this simple. You can't on one hand say, oh, if somebody says something racist, I'm never talking to them again. You can't say that. I'm not saying that. But you also can't say like, whatever they do, if they're family, it doesn't matter. Let them do it. Right. Some of the stuff she says is downright silly. Like she has some quote about, like, so what if your sister's judgmental? Maybe she has pretty holiday nails. Like, come on. What are we talking about here? Yeah. That's my rant.
That's your
and
rant.
It's seen.
And I'll take it a little bit further. They're kind of staying on the surface stuff, right? What about actual abuse? What about actual childhood trauma? So I'm supposed to just continue to endure that? And to me, I mean, essentially you are I don't know, essentially misappropriating your own theory, which, we often leave the second part off. She's like, let them and let me. And it's like, let me remove myself from abuse. Let me remove myself from that uncle that essentially maybe sexually assaulted someone, right? And I guess if we are looking at interviews with folks that are on their deathbed that have said like, well, I regretted that, I was like, well, okay, let us make our own regrets, right? And then let's look at the data, the research, 30 years from now, and see like, okay, what were the outcomes of that? Are people allowing themselves to go no contact? I don't know. It just, again, like, kind of like what you were saying, like, it's staying a little too surface level for what people are actually experiencing when it comes to this. And then that's, I think I said something a little bit, fragrant with like, oh, that it might cause someone to lose their life. But I mean, some of this is life or death, especially when it comes to having that kind of deep-rooted trauma that you've experienced with your family.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's complicated. Should we break it down a little bit? Like, how do we get here? Like, why is this a thing now?
Yeah, it's a thing now, because so I'll share my experience. I've been hearing about it for a while. A podcast I listened to, they had talked about going no contact with their dad, based off of that experience. As a queer person, folks of the LGBTQ plus community, we always have to find our own family, our own chosen family, because we've been kicked out of ours, right? But this is really an interesting, almost like generational debate around this. And so I'm thinking of some of the historical context around this is, okay, maybe you didn't have the opportunity to do this. Estrangements, maybe in the earlier 1900s were a bit more unspoken, where you just quietly cut ties with that abusive or alcoholic parent, or that parent, skipped town or something like that. So it just was never discussed. And then you get to this therapy revolution, where younger generations are talking more freely and open about their experience, about going to therapy, self-help, psychology. And we're saying like, we have more of this language now, language for what the harm was. So, terms like, emotional neglect, narcissism, gaslighting.
Don't say it.
Language.
Oh no.
So then,
you gotta explain that. Explain the gaslighting and narcissism. Like why I'm laughing at that.
Because I imagine because you've heard from your wife that these terms are being used and thrown around social media. So everyone now is a therapist or a psychologist, and they're just calling everybody a narcissist. And it's like, okay, the actual definition of that, like that guy is a jerk. I wouldn't say he's a narcissist because you hate the experience, but I'm assuming that that's what you mean.
Yes. I'm sorry. I just had to throw it in there because if they listen, we need to give them the due credit on that. So I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, all good. And so we learn this language, and then we're getting into, okay, how do I actually apply this language to my own experience? So you are having these, maybe millennial children, grown children, Gen Z grown children who are saying, no more, no mas. I'm making decisions for myself. But then there comes this duality around that. And that's the reality of, okay, our parents, our grandparents, they did the best that they could with what they knew at the time, or what information or what experience they even had. Because my God, like if you'd grown up with a silent generation parent, the war stories I've heard from that generation. And then you're applying these things to how you've raised your children, thinking that, and feeling like you're doing better than what you experienced. But then as the younger generations are getting more access because of internet, because of social media, much to therapist chagrin, they're seeing like, no, that wasn't great either. But I think being able to have that honest conversation around that would be so helpful. But what happens is you might reflect out to your parent, and then they just go off on you. So then essentially in that case, you're like, okay, obviously you're not ready to have this conversation, never will be. So I'm just not. So yeah, we have to kind of reckon with that of like, there are two sides of this, but in this conversation right now, we're mostly hearing from the parent side of like, how dare you like cut me off after everything that I've done for you and all of the stuff. And it's like, well, baby, I didn't even ask to be here, but okay. I don't know.
Right. That's right. No, it's a little bit kind of like that Elvis Presley, he's the devil, where each generation looks down at the ones coming after them and are like, oh, young people today. There's a little bit of that in this where it's like, hey, like, how dare you question the family unit? What gives you the right to opt out? Like, I didn't get to opt out, or whatever the feeling is. I think younger generations are empowered for the reasons you talked about. And that doesn't mean it's always appropriate. Again, we're not saying you should always do it or not do it or whatever. It's just, it's not a bad evolution to be able to consciously opt out of your family if it's challenging your values in a significant way, if there's real harm, mental harm, emotional harm, whatever it is. This is something that we kind of, it also goes against kind of the culture that we've grown up with, Des, at least you and I. We were talking about some of the movies we watched over the holidays, and I know one of my favorites is Family Stone, which is all about kind of family dynamics. Now, nobody's going no contact in that. I don't think they do. But it's just kind of like, hey, you know what? We're all screwed up, and in the end, it's all going to work out. I even joked that maybe Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was the first no contact story of the holidays, where Rudolph just is like, screw you, I'm out of here. Don't make fun of my nose. So, I think it's all around us. We don't necessarily see it. But I bet we see more of it, and we're just not thinking of it. And things have changed, it turns out, also in the world over the last 8 years or so.
Yeah. They definitely have. And yeah, essentially you bring that up and it's like holiday movies have been indoctrinating us into this, like, suck it up and deal with your family. And Home Alone, he's left behind to fend for himself amidst family chaos. Like, what? Granted, we know that doesn't happen, but still. The Happiest Season, which is essentially a family doesn't accept, or like the daughter isn't out to her parents. They don't accept the dad's like running for political office and all this stuff. And you're just supposed to, like, the partner came with, and you're like, oh, I'm just supposed to be the best friend, and it ends all happy. Everything's great, but that's not the reality for everyone. Right. And so then getting into okay, how did we get here? Piece around essentially politics. You brought up, navigating that at the dinner table with family. And it's essentially a lot of this really blew up after the 2016 election. It fractured family dynamics. It was like, whoa, what just happened? And then, it deepened, and that fracture has deepened even more, with this most recent election. And so, this is essentially, we saw with the SNL skit, essentially this is a response to that. The Adele's Hello, hilarious skit when that album came out of, hey, deal with your family. I don't know if you want to like talk a little bit about that.
Well, what's funny about it, if you remember the skit, it was like a family getting together, and within like 30 seconds or a minute, there's like an aunt who's talking about seeing an ISIS at the A&P. And the daughter's like, that wasn't somebody from ISIS, that was a blah, blah, right? And so they start arguing, and then the young girl in the family puts on Hello, and they all start just like singing that song, and kind of being all positive with each other. And then the music stops and they get into it again. I remember that when we had Thanksgiving that year, and we had family over, extended family, that was very divided politically. And when everybody got there, we said, hey, we want everybody to see this as a reminder. And we played the video for the whole family to kind of get in the spirit of like, and it was crickets, Des. Like, everybody was just like, nobody laughed. Nobody said that. We're like, okay, maybe we're not ready. Honestly, like, I know that a lot of this is exacerbated since 2016, but it probably goes back further, to be fair. Like, I would blame social media first. as causing the divisions that then show up at the Thanksgiving table. But certainly they've gotten worse. I would say they've even gotten worse this year. Like it's like a exponential thing where it was like, oh, 2 times worse, then 4 times worse, and now we're like 16 times worse because of some of the stuff going on in the world around us right now, actually.
I will say, though, I feel incredibly lucky having grown up Black, and that politics usually aren't an issue I have to navigate. I'm not saying that all Black families don't have that, but I will say I hear so much from my white friends who are like, oh, God, I have to go deal with this. My parents or just Fox News or this or that and the third. And I'm like, oof, thank goodness I don't have to deal with any of that whatsoever.
Yeah, it's I've dealt with it most of my adult life. And it got so bad that we did have to set a rule that we would not talk about politics or raise it. Interestingly, for my dad, which I'll go ahead and use him as the example, but he was a Fox News dad, went off the deep end and was really angry all the time. And so he would just be, he'd be basically an a-hole if we got going. It was bad. It was really bad. There was some personal dynamics going on there as well, but like everybody else in my close family was on the other side of the boat. So I always felt like he was, ganged up on and blah, blah, blah. But we go over back when my mom and dad were with us, we go over to their place and my dad would be in his bedroom blasting Fox News and my mom would be in her bedroom blasting MSNBC because they both couldn't hear. So they both had TVs. You'd walk into the house and it was loud as shit. And they're just like, it was amazing. Amazing to behold.
Imagine being in a divided household like that. Okay, yes. So essentially, here we are. And why does this matter now? I know, Chris, you had shared something about, some of the like filial laws that exist, that as we have these parents that are aging, right, if you do have this dynamic or estrangement with them, what does it mean as they get older? Like, how does that affect their, care end of life? How does it affect us as their children have it to navigate? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the reason why that's related here is because, we gave the two biggest examples from the past month of Mel Robbins and Oprah. Coincidence or not, they happen to be of a boomer generation. And so people are trying to put 2 and 2 together and saying like, okay, is this a explicit or implicit message about, hey, don't go no contact, you're going to have to take care of us. And that's interesting in a number of contexts, but before we get into all that, the filial laws, I didn't even know that was a thing. I live in Minnesota. I managed both my mom and my dad in the final years of with help, obviously a ton of help, but all the way through their passing. And financially, they were not in a good position. And our strategy was just like, look, you're going to go on Medicaid. There's no point in like this or that because you just don't have the money. And we didn't worry about this debt or that thing being over our heads. Didn't worry about it at all. It wasn't our deal. And if they went bankrupt, which they did very late in life, or they had debts outstanding, wasn't our concern because we didn't even know a filial law, was a thing, but it certainly wasn't a thing in Minnesota. So in other words, we were not on the hook for our parents' finances after they passed. But that is the case. Turns out it's a case in many states. And so that's makes it really complicated.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of boomer parents out there because of the largest generation.
Yeah.
And so, with Medicaid, you bring that up. And essentially with that one big, beautiful bill that was signed, there's going to be a ton.
So beautiful. It's so...
Yeah, essentially, that is being cut, essentially gutted, which in SNAP was cut and gutted. And there's a lot of other issues that are coming, especially when it comes to healthcare and Medicare and what's going to actually be covered. And then you add on that additional, filial law, which is essentially looking at, different states have different laws. And what it is like right now there's like 27 states. And again, that fluctuates because of legislative updates. States are now starting to say like, oh my God. But essentially this is a colonial era law where it's the filial responsibility of the adult children to pay for indigent parents' care. So 27 states have already invoked it. Several states like Idaho, Montana, Iowa, Utah, they have already removed this responsibility from the laws. But I live in Tennessee, right? I'm based in, my families are in Tennessee, which there are filial laws. So I'm like, oh, I am beholden. But also growing up as I think families of color, children of immigrants, we already just kind of assume that we're going to be taking care of our parents. It's just kind of ingrained in the culture. And so it's something that I had already thought about. But once you had brought that to my attention, I realized like, oh no, this is actually really like on me. And so I started thinking about like, okay, I need to get a will or power of attorney, or I don't know, do I need to set up a trust so that, they don't take my mom's house once she has to go, care, and like there's all these things. And it complicates it if you have a terrible relationship with your parent, because how are you supposed to make these decisions for someone that might have been abusive, might have didn't accept you for who you are, but then you're expected to just suck it up and take care of them? I can't say that everyone's going to do that.
No, and this is another shot at Mel Robbins, because in her essay, she broaches that just a little bit, and she's like, don't bring up moving your parents to independent living at Thanksgiving. Like, they don't want to hear it. Like basically don't address issues, even if they're going to have a negative impact for you. So that to me also, again, is like, if there's a filial law and I'm on the hook, what I'm just supposed to let them do whatever. Like it just actually adds a complication to the whole thing. Cause I know when I talked about this stuff with my parents, if your parents ever get to this point and you have to talk about taking the car away, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Like, they're the best drivers in the world. I don't know why in the world they would lose their car, right? So it actually adds a whole nother conflict-ridden dimension to what we're talking about if you also have to think about your own finances on top of theirs. And so I think that's... And the other thing, Des, I want to throw in here is like, I think probably a lot of our audience get this, but a lot of people out there misunderstand Medicaid, right? Because of all the bullshit propaganda about Medicaid being welfare queens and all these poor people that are just like buying steaks with their SNAP benefits. And it's just like bullshit. So it's just a couple of stats, right? So this is from the Kaiser Family Foundation, well-respected source. 6 out of 10 nursing home residents pay for their nursing home stays with Medicaid. I know my dad did, for sure, right? It's super expensive. And he was in independent living and basically burned through the last of his savings. And then we had picked one intentionally that would take Medicaid. And he just shifted to Medicaid. If he didn't have that, there's no law that says I have to take care of him, but what am I going to do? Right? Like, he's going to have to come live with us because I'm not going to let him stay on the street. More than half of Medicaid spending goes to seniors or those with disabilities, right? Even though, they're not the majority of Medicaid recipients, the costs are so much higher for seniors. So it's just the Medicaid cuts that are coming are really going to force families to figure this stuff out. And if you're gone no contact, or your dad was abusive, or your mom is racist and refuses to shut up about it, right? Then, boy, that's why this is something people need to pay attention to. They need to get ahead of it. As much as we're giving Mel and Oprah crap for their point of view, being simplistic and one-sided, at least the issue is now something that is out there, so that people can really think through it. Not that it wasn't there before, but it seems to have hit the cultural zeitgeist in a way that it really hadn't.
I'm so glad you brought that up about just how people think about Medicaid. and like what it actually is. And something I started like a financial independence, retire early journey some years back. And, there's these different Facebook groups, and I had learned about, people had posted about whether themselves as they're getting older and retiring, or they're talking about their parents, and they're sharing these stories of, and especially around women, because a lot of this stuff always falls on the women.
Hey,
unless you're an only child. I know it does. You were in a different case. Do you have sisters? Wait, do you have sisters?
No, I have a brother who helped, but and of course my wife did it. Oh my God, if it wasn't for my wife, no way. But I was like the lead dude. But I'm not trying to take credit, Des. I'm sorry. It does usually fall on the women.
But if there are like female siblings,
yes,
usually
that's
falls
right.
on them. But anyway, this was a women's financial group, and they were talking about like having to make these decisions of, my parents need to get divorced. Like my mom's dementia has just, increased. And so in order to keep paying for this, they're going to take the house, or we have to. So they had to get divorced so that the house wasn't in her name, for example, so that dad could still have a place to live, as an example. These are the kinds of things that we start to have to think about, that brought all of this to my attention, which got me thinking about like, okay, my mom, she's a widow. So what's the situation here? She fought tooth and nail to, have to get this house, right? As a working class woman, and like what, just for it to be taken away, for healthcare needs to be taken care of. And so, as we're looking at, what's kind of the takeaway from this conversation, in general, is not just the, was Mel right, or Oprah, or what have you, but it's also like, think critically about like what all is kind of going on. You have these conversations that we usually kind of get distracted by, but meanwhile, let's actually look at what these laws mean, what these changes, what these cuts, these defunding legislation actually does to us. And essentially, I'll give my experience with my mom. It's like, okay, she's getting older, and what's going to happen with this house? Like, does she have a will? So these are things that I got set up for her, a will. So when you're thinking about this, essentially my word of advice is just educate yourself, right? First, I'll go back to the main topic, and like, if you don't have a licensed therapist in your life, maybe get one to help you talk through, think through what's going on with you and your parents. So that you actually have some guidance, and not just listening to these blanket statements from your friend Mel and Oprah, who don't know the nuances of your family and your dynamics and what has actually happened. Start there. But then second, educate yourself, find out what are the filial laws in your state. What does that mean for you and your parents? And then, or even for yourself and maybe your kids, how do you want to set your kids up for that, right? So they don't have this to think about. Get a clear understanding of your parents' financial situation. I know, Chris, you had mentioned like, thank God y'all talked about it. Like they're saying like, well, don't talk about it at Thanksgiving. That's fine. But we're going to talk about it tomorrow.
Right.
To get this figured out. And then consider what steps you need to take regarding your parents, and also your own will, power of attorney, getting maybe an irrevocable trust, putting everything in that so you can maintain. That's essentially what the wealthy does. Everything is in a trust. Nothing is in their name so that it can't be taken away for tax implications. Let's do like they are doing. Let's learn from them so you don't end up in these situations. But that's essentially my takeaway from all this is get a real licensed therapist and actually look at what's going on in the laws and with your parents and what you need to get set up for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Any
And get
thoughts,
help, like you said, a therapist, but also as I look back and, I had to be a caregiver for a number of years, but I didn't have it as, it was difficult. It's like a part-time job. If you're moving into a stage where you got to think about all this stuff, and you may not be, it may just be a question of, do I do no contact or not? But to your point, Des, like, even if in your 30s, you're thinking that, you just think about what's coming, even if it's 20, 30 years down the road. It's good to at least have your eye on it. I wish I had, read more on being a caregiver. I would have approached, I think it was Thanksgiving, where we approached my parents about moving into independent living. It did not go well. So I'm going to talk out of the other side of my mouth now, because that's, again, like you said, maybe that shouldn't come up in Thanksgiving, but I don't think the conversation would have gone better if it had been the next day. It was more of how it was approached, which was very sensitive and, thoughtful, but, it landed like a neutron bomb. And so my takeaway is like, look, this is super complicated. It's not as simple as ignore the racist and just compliment her nail polish. For fuck's sake, it's not that simple. But I see it from the other side too. I have a very good friend whose daughters went no contact with him when they were graduating high school, roughly that age. He's had no contact with them for, I don't know, even almost a decade. He has no idea why. And so in those circumstances, I think it is fair to, like, if you're going no contact, let people know why, give them a chance. So if it's a racist and they're like, you know what, I'm going to really look at myself. If what you're saying is true, then I don't want to be that or whatever. But if they don't, then you've given them notice as to why, right? It's their choice to change or not change. But if you don't tell them, they're never going to know. So I would suggest that. And again, I've been talking about my dad, who was abrasive, political nut job, Fox News dad, particularly during his final years. He actually had a mini stroke. He had 2 mini strokes. Part of me wonders whether that altered his perspective on life, that he was so angry. Oh my gosh. And if I had not, through therapy and through my wife, who's a therapist, figured out how to get past that, it was very, very rough up until the last few years. And I was able to rise above it. He didn't change, but to Mel's point and to Oprah's point, like, I actually did figure out a way to not let it bother me. But it was also because I had no choice, because if I didn't help him, nobody was going to help him. But I'm grateful that we got through that. So, I would not have liked my dad to have passed in anger and hate with nobody around him to help him. But that would have been his choice. So who knows how I would have felt. But anyway, it's complicated. Get some help. We'll put some resources. For example, there's an organization called standalone.org that helps families deal with estrangement. That's not just kids. It's got advice and guidance for children looking to go no contact. It's got advice and guidance for parents that are on the other side of that. And so it seems to be we saw it across a number of the resources we looked at. A great organization. There's others out there as well, obviously, but we'll provide some resources in the notes.
And one last thing, I know threw a lot out there on this episode, but we are not licensed therapists, nor accountants, nor attorneys. We're just saying educate yourselves on these things so you can make an educated decision for yourself. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thank you. And that's for our significant others, by the way. That's for you guys. All right. I think we should close. You ready to close our first episode?
Let's do it. Yeah, this is great.
It was. Thank you so much for being part of this. You and I are going to be doing this. We'll have some guests occasionally, but really looking forward to doing this on a weekly basis. So thanks for being there today, Des.
Yeah, it was fun. It's just getting to share and learn from each other's life experiences. That's really what makes this world goes around for me.
Yeah. And thank you all so much for joining us, listening, watching. Hopefully this has helped you cope or learn a bit more about how to deal with the world, or in this case, your family, which may seem like your world around the holidays. Make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. That helps ensure that more people can hear our show. Visit www.bearing287.com or follow me on Substack to access other helpful content from our network. And with all that, I'm Chris Bevolo, and on behalf of the I'm Not Even Supposed to Be Here show and Bearing 287, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.